A special event was hosted by King Ahasuerus in his palace at Shushan. During the feast, which lasted for 180 days, the king commanded his queen, Vashti, to appear before him and his guests to display her beauty. But Vashti refused to come out. This act was seen as a grave insult to the king's authority. Seeking the advice of his counselors, the king decided to replace Vashti, removing her from her position as queen. King Ahasuerus ordered a search for the most beautiful young women throughout the empire. The most beautiful ones were selected, and they underwent beauty treatments before being presented to the king. Among those chosen was a young Jewish woman named Hadassah, who was also known as Esther. She was an orphan, raised by her cousin Mordecai, who was a Jewish living in Shushan, and also one of the king's servants. Esther was taken to the palace, and, because of her beauty and grace, she quickly found favor with the king's servant in charge of the harem. When it was Esther's turn to be presented to King Ahasuerus, she found favor in his eyes, and he chose her to be his queen. However, Esther did not reveal her Jewish heritage, as Mordecai had instructed her to keep it a secret. Meanwhile, Haman, a high-ranking official in the king's court, was promoted to a position of great power. He demanded that all the king's servants bow down to him, but Mordecai refused to do so, explaining that as a Jew, he could not bow to anyone but God. This stirred up anger in Haman, and he sought to destroy not only Mordecai, but all the Jews in the Persian Empire. Haman convinced King Ahasuerus to issue a decree calling for the extermination of all Jews on a specific day, and the king sealed it. The decree causing great distress among the Jewish throughout the empire. When Mordecai learned of the decree, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned publicly. He sent a message to Esther, urging her to plead with the king for the lives of her people. However, approaching the king uninvited was dangerous, as it could result in death, unless the king extended his golden scepter to spare the person's life. Esther, after much contemplation and prayer, she decided to take the risk. She asked Mordecai to gather all the Jews in Shushan to fast and pray for 3 days and nights, while she and her maids did the same. After the fast, Esther courageously approached the king Ahasuerus. Seeing her, he extended his scepter, and Esther was spared. Instead of immediately revealing her request, Esther invited the king and Haman to a banquet she had prepared. During the banquet, the king asked Esther what her request was, but she invited them to a second banquet the next day before revealing her petition. That night, the king was unable to sleep. He asked for the royal chronicles to be read to him. He was reminded of how Mordecai had saved his life by exposing the assassination plot. King Ahasuerus realized that Mordecai had never been rewarded for his loyalty. The next day, when Haman came to the palace to request the king's permission to hang Mordecai, the king instead asked Haman how a man, whom the king wished to honor, should be treated. Assuming the king was referring to him, Haman suggested a lavish display of honor, including being dressed in royal robes and paraded through the city on the king's horse. To Haman's shock and dismay, the king commanded him to do all he had suggested for Mordecai. Haman had no choice but to comply, which led to his humiliation. At the second banquet, the king again asked Esther what her request was. This time, Esther revealed that she was Jewish, and that Haman's plan would result in her death and the death of her people. The king arranged and ordered that Haman be hanged on the very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. However, the decree to destroy the Jews could not be revoked, as it was sealed with the king's signet ring. Instead, Ahasuerus issued a new decree allowing the Jews to defend themselves against any attackers. When the appointed day came, the Jews successfully defended themselves, and many of their enemies were killed. To commemorate their deliverance, the Jewish people established the Feast of Purim, a joyous celebration marked by feasting, giving gifts to the poor, and sharing food with friends and family. Mordecai was elevated to a position of great power in the Persian court, and the Jewish people were saved. Remember, the main importance of that your beauty is to propagate the kingdom of heaven, to save soul, to make the world a happy place. When God put you in that commanding position, how did you treat others? The story of Esther is a powerful testimony to God's providence and the importance of faith and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Esther's bravery, combined with Mordecai's wisdom and loyalty, led to the people of God preservation, deliverance, and protection. Ask for the forgiveness of wrongful use of your beauty. Remember, Christ is coming soon. Like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video.